Now I know how you feel. That thought rips through my head as I stare at the crumpled sheet of paper clutched in my fist. The edges bite into my skin, and I notice the faint tremble in my knuckles. Once, I thought nothing could shake me like this. No news, no betrayal, no broken promise. I'd always been that man who believed in steady roads and quiet nights. But as the lines of text blur in front of my eyes, DNA results, the final blow, my own reflection in the living room mirror mocks me. There's a stranger looking back, a man who can't fathom how he got here. I press my thumb over the words, trying to blot them out. Useless. The child I thought was mine. It's all there in black and white, official and cold. My knees feel weak, so I sink onto the couch, letting the paper slide from my hand to the floor. That's when I catch sight of my wedding ring. It glints under the soft lamp, looking too polished, too clean for a life so thoroughly tarnished. The memory hits me like a slow knife, so many details, stacked and simmering, all leading to the moment everything collapsed. I used to come home from my engineering job, wave at Alice, my wife, and we'd share dinner or a glass of wine. Simple, safe, the kind of life men 50 or older might envy. We had decent jobs, a modest home in suburban Chicago, no major debt. I'd thought we were building a future. We had a bed we shared, a mortgage we paid down monthly, and each other's company in the quiet hours. That's what I believed, wholeheartedly. Even now, I can taste the memory of that night I uncorked the wine and waited. I'd let the bottle breathe, swirling the red liquid in our best glasses. I told her earlier, I'm opening the Malbec. Special occasion. She nodded, lips curved in a distracted smile. I should have noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her voice wavered. Instead, I fixated on the wine, on wanting to share a moment with her, maybe talk about the future, things that seemed so important at the time. I waited for her to join me, a private toast, but she never came. It's late, she'd said from the hallway, rummaging for her coat. Work emergency. My terminal's broken. That's what she always called her laptop docking station. Her terminal. A convenient excuse. I just nodded, too tired to question. A typical Daniel response. Stoic acceptance. Only after she left did I notice the glass I poured for her remained untouched. The wine was going flat as the minutes ticked by. The house, usually warm, felt cold. And me, I was just as deflated, letting the air seep out of me. It was a trivial moment, yet it stung. Something in my gut told me that was more than an ordinary night. I wish I had confronted her then, demanded she talk, or at least forced her to say she needed space. But that's not who I was. I was the dependable, quiet one. I rarely asked questions because I trusted her. Trusted in the idea that if there was a problem, we'd talk it through eventually. Days later, I found those handcuffs under our pillow. Gift handcuffs with a small, mocking inscription. I love your shoulders, not his. The words made no sense to me at first, like a puzzle piece from someone else's life. I remember turning them over in my hands, the metallic glint, the smooth etching. That's when the first wave of real doubt crashed over me, dark and suffocating. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the beginning. The end, ironically, was just around the corner. The noise of that memory fades, and I'm back in the present on the couch, battered by 100 swirling thoughts. I can still feel the sting of reading that line on the cuffs. Not his. She'd given them to him. Or had he given them to her? My mind conjured images I never wanted to see. Him hooking those cuffs around her wrists, his lips on her neck, her whispers in his ear. I tried to crush those visions, but they took root anyway. They festered, turning me into a man I barely recognized. I push off the couch and step over the paper on the floor. I don't want to see it again. Not now. My feet move me through the house with mechanical inertia. I open the front door, and the cold air hits me like a slap. Darkness blankets the suburban street, save for the soft glow of streetlights. This is the same sidewalk she'd stumbled down after the nights with him. I've replayed the scenario 1,000 times. She climbs out of his car, composes herself at the front door, tries to slip in without turning on the lights. She must have hoped I'd be asleep so she could avoid my gaze. At first, I was suspicious but unsure. Maybe she'd gotten home late from the office. Maybe she had an after-hours meeting or some marketing event. I told myself any convenient lie to keep my illusions intact. But illusions only last so long. I recall the exact night I saw him waiting in the driveway, engine idling, headlights piercing the darkness like hungry eyes. Ryan Collins, her lover, though I didn't know his name then. I saw his silhouette behind the wheel, a faint glow of a cigarette illuminating his face. That was the moment I realized I had become nothing more than an unwitting accomplice to her deception. A fool stepping aside as she hopped from my life into his arms. My heart hammered. My mouth felt dry. I could have marched out there, banged on his window, demanded answers. But I froze. The headlights flicked off, and the car rolled away. The tension in my chest felt like it would snap my ribs. Stepping out onto the porch now, I see the same empty driveway. If I shut my eyes, I can almost picture him there. The recollection stings my pride like an open wound. And yet, the memory also steals me. I need that sting. I need it to remember who I am, who I've become. I come back inside, letting the door close. Darkness. Then a flicker as I switch on the lamp. Another place, another time. Just like a film fade in. The scene of her betrayal. Let me walk through it, piece by piece. I'd followed her one night, couldn't help myself. She said she was going out for a quick errand, wearing a casual blouse and jeans, which didn't look out of place. But the way she styled her hair, the sparkle in her eyes, I knew something was off. She'd never looked so alive for a grocery run. So I waited 5 minutes, then hopped into my own car and trailed behind. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my pulse beating in my ears. I half hoped I'd seen nothing suspicious. Maybe she'd really gone to pick up milk or a birthday cake for a coworker. Anything but what my gut told me. She parked on a dimly lit street, near an auto garage I'd never noticed before. A sign read Collins Customs, neon letters half burnt, the place closed for the day. My heart hammered as I saw a figure step out from the side door. He wore a jacket, jeans, had that confident stride. She walked straight into his arms. No hesitation, no guilt. Then the two of them slipped back into the building. The door shut, and I was left alone in the silence of the night, the only witness to my own heartbreak. I killed the engine, crept out of the car, and pressed myself against the side of the garage. My breath came in short gasps, clouds forming in the chill air. There was a window, slightly cracked open. Voices, laughter, and then something else. Those soft, intimate sounds that can't be mistaken. I forced myself to peer inside. Inside that dimly lit space, I glimpsed her pinned against a table, his hands on her waist, her lips parted in a moan. My mind reeled. My chest clenched until it felt like my lungs were collapsing. This was my wife, in a place that smelled of engine oil and rubber, letting another man run his hands over her body. And she wasn't resisting. She was pressing closer, her hair falling around her shoulders as she arched her neck back. I remember the squeak of leather, the clang of a metal tool dropping to the floor. His jacket slid from his shoulders. She ran her fingertips along his arms. She laughed softly, the same laugh she used to share with me in our bedroom after a silly movie. My stomach churned. I didn't realize tears were streaming down my face until one of them slid across my lips, tasting of salt and shame. I wanted to burst in, throw him against the wall, demand to know how dare he touch my wife. But I was paralyzed. Rage and heartbreak pinned me harder than any barbell at the gym. I couldn't remember how to breathe properly. The betrayal was so vivid, so raw, that all I could do was stand there in the half-darkness, pressed to a cold wall, while my world fell apart. Moments later, maybe minutes, maybe hours, I couldn't tell, she let out a whisper that broke something in me. "Don't stop. The intimacy in her voice was a knife to my gut. I felt dizzy, like I might collapse. I realized, this is real. This isn't some twisted dream. She wants him, needs him, right here. Not me. The final blow came when he grabbed something off the table, a pair of shiny metal cuffs, and she let him lock them around her wrists, leaning her head back in submission. Their hushed laughter drifted out the window. I fled, stumbled back to my car, heart racing, vision blurred with tears. I drove home on autopilot, not even sure how I arrived in one piece. A leftover drop of her perfume, still lingering in my passenger seat from some earlier trip, filled my nose. My whole body trembled. By the time I got inside, the wine from before was still on the table, half of my glass untouched, hers fully poured but abandoned. I sank into a chair, stared at the swirling red, and felt my world tilt. That was the moment I first truly understood what it meant to be betrayed. Not just in the sense of someone cheated, but in the bone-deep sense that everything you believed about your life was false. I closed my eyes. Another time shift, like a film scene flashing forward to me standing in our bedroom a week later, rummaging around in the linen closet, hoping to find something, anything, that might give me closure. Instead, I found the handcuffs, and that mocking inscription, "I love your shoulders," not his. That's when I realized she was telling him something about me. Some inside joke or comparison about my body. My shoulders. It was such a bizarre, intimate detail that it made me feel physically ill. And the worst part, I actually hadn't known my shoulders were considered attractive by anyone until that moment. The inscription read like a twisted confession that yes, she'd been talking about me in their bedroom banter, turning my body into an object of discussion or ridicule. Days blurred together. My performance at work faltered. My colleagues asked if I was all right. I lied, said I was dealing with some family matter. True enough. My father, old and living alone in North Carolina, kept calling. I answered once, gave him the same lie. Couldn't bring myself to confess that my wife was bedding another man, that everything was unraveling. And then the DNA test for the child. That turned everything from heartbreak to a black hole that consumed my insides. I'd suspected for a while. Timelines, suspicious nights, the child's features, but seeing it confirmed was a new level of pain. Yet for some reason, it didn't destroy me outright. It felt like the final, official signature on a death sentence I'd already accepted, not the father. I remember the day we got those results. She stood in the living room, eyes glistening, stammering through an explanation I could barely parse. I didn't know, she kept saying, tears tracking down her cheeks. We weren't planning. Ryan was. It just happened. She sobbed, and all I could manage was a single word. Why? The rest of my voice caught in my throat. She launched into a desperate monologue about feeling neglected, about wanting more excitement, about how it was a mistake. I stared at her, wanted to throw the papers in her face and roar, but the anger had settled into something icy, cold, internal. I set the envelope on the table and walked away. She followed, voice trembling. "Daniel, please, talk to me." I just repeated, "Why?" She couldn't answer. Not in any way that mattered. That's the dynamic we fell into. She'd try to elaborate, using sentences that ran on. Apologies, excuses, half-lies, please. I'd respond with short, clipped phrases. I'd become the man of few words, because everything I needed to say was lodged behind a wall of heartbreak. That's how the days passed. She wanted me to stay, for the baby's sake, for our sake. But I was only physically present in that house. My mind, my heart. They checked out. I still did the chores. I still paid the bills. I still slept on the couch. But inside, I was plotting my way out, even if I didn't fully realize it yet. I recall a tense dinner a few nights later. She tried to pretend everything was normal. Made lasagna, set the table. I could see how she'd taken extra care. Cloth napkins, a candle. As soon as I tasted the food, My stomach roiled. I couldn't handle the pretense. "Not hungry," I muttered, pushing the plate aside. She opened her mouth to protest, but I stood up, left my fork half buried in cheese and sauce, and stepped outside. She followed me to the porch, arms folded. "Daniel," she began, "I know you're hurt, but we can't live like ghosts in this house." I turned my gaze to the streetlight, flickering in the night. "Ghosts can't hurt," I said, voice quiet. Then I slipped back inside, leaving her alone in the cold. It was a cruel remark, but I didn't care. Not long after, Ryan vanished from her life. She tried to hide it from me at first, but I could see the shift in her, the frantic phone calls, the tear-stained eyes in the morning. She'd slump by the door, waiting for him to show up, to rescue her from the mess they'd created. But he never did. That man, who was all swagger and heat, apparently decided fatherhood or commitment wasn't for him. Typical. She'd staked everything on him, and he left her in the wind. Time crawled. I'd come home from work, see her red-rimmed eyes, and realize she'd been crying. I'd sigh, hang up my coat, and say nothing. At night, she'd wait on the couch until the early hours, phone in hand, hoping for a text or call. Some nights, I'd stand in the dark hallway, watch her from behind a corner. She looked so small, hugging her knees, staring at the silent screen. A part of me felt pity. Another part felt a grim satisfaction. Now you know how it feels to be abandoned. But no matter how twisted it sounds, my sense of loyalty was stronger than my hatred. Whenever she was on the brink of a breakdown, I'd find myself next to her, offering a shoulder. Useless empathy for someone who had shattered me. I remember one evening she said in a trembling voice, "I can't do this alone." I just nodded. "Okay," she sniffled. "Daniel, I need help." Another nod. "All right." That was my pattern. Brief, monotone responses. Inside, I was hollowing out. It was as though the real Daniel had taken a back seat, content to watch from a distance. I did what needed to be done. Helped with groceries, paid the bills, gave her someone to sob to when she realized Ryan truly wasn't coming back. But the spark, that thing that had once made me believe in us, was gone. Time spiraled forward, and in her 8th month of pregnancy, she returned from a checkup, eyes swollen, and said, "It's a boy." I stood there, feeling nothing. She broke down into tears. She wanted me to share her pain, her fear, maybe her hope, but I was numb. I guess she saw it in my face because she sobbed harder, pressing her hands to her belly. I offered no comfort. After all, the DNA test made it clear this child was not mine. I had no illusions of building some happy family with a woman who'd chosen someone else's arms over mine. One day, she came home from an errand and found the house emptier. I'd started packing up my possessions in secret. Old photos, clothes, tools, everything that was distinctly mine. She opened the door to our bedroom and let out a startled gasp. My side of the closet was half empty. The sight of bare hangers clanking together filled the silence. She looked at me, panic flashing across her features. "What are you doing?" she demanded, tears threatening to spill again. I just stared at her, feeling the weight of all the months of betrayal, heartbreak, and quiet agony. Then I said softly, "I'm leaving." She shook her head. "No, you can't. You can't leave me like this. I need you." I dropped a pair of folded jeans into the suitcase. "You needed me a year ago, too." Her sob choked out. "Daniel, please, we can fix this." I stopped her with a raised hand. "Not me. Not my child. Not my life anymore." That was probably the longest speech I'd given her in months. She went still, tears streaking her cheeks. I zipped the suitcase, walked out of the bedroom, down the hall. She followed, breath hitching in frantic sobs. I saw the panic in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't bluffing. The final blow came when I brushed past the baby's half-painted nursery. She'd started decorating it weeks ago, presumably hoping I'd cave and be the doting father. A swirl of pastel colors lined the walls. I paused, staring at the half-finished mural of clouds and a silly cartoon sun. For a moment, I remembered how I'd once imagined painting that room together. My chest felt tight, but that life was gone. She clung to my arm. "Don't do this. I love you, Daniel." I pulled away gently, locked eyes with her. "No," I said, voice hollow. "You love yourself, your fantasies. But you stopped loving me a long time ago." Then I moved to the front door. She tried to say something else, but I didn't wait. I walked out. Door closes. Darkness. Cut to another space. My new apartment. I found a small place in the city. Not too big, just enough room for me. I took up a side hobby, tinkering with old motorcycles, though ironically, that was Ryan's line of work. Maybe it was my way of wresting control from that memory. Each day, I immersed myself in the mechanical whir of parts, the smell of oil, the hum of an engine under my hands. A part of me wanted to hate all things motorcycles because it reminded me of him. Instead, I used the routine as therapy, forging a new identity in the process. My father visited once, but we barely talked about Alice. He must have seen the tension in my jaw, so we mostly spoke about small things. The weather, his health, my job. But at least he was there, an anchor. Weeks stretched into months. Alice tried calling, texting. Initially, I answered in single words. Yes, no, I'm fine. Over time, I stopped responding altogether. I was done being her fallback, done playing second to a man who had walked away. She gave birth to a boy, apparently healthy. She sent me pictures, but I never opened them. I wasn't that child's father. She made that choice the day she let Ryan lock those cuffs on her wrists. My nights became a silent war. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I fought the images of her body entwined with his, the laughter in that garage. I'd grit my teeth until my jaw ached. Sometimes, it felt like a black hole of rage was devouring me from within. But I refused to let it drag me under. Coldness was my armor. If she had inflicted the deepest wound, I would seal it with ice. Cold is still an emotion, after all. It just doesn't show itself with tears or outbursts. It sits there, freezing your soul bit by bit. I wanted revenge. Sometimes I fantasized about finding Ryan, making him pay for what he'd done. But the more I stewed, the more I realized hurting him physically wouldn't fix the betrayal. He wasn't the only culprit. She let it happen. She chose him over me. And so, my true revenge became living without her. The most devastating thing I could do was remove my presence, my support, my devotion. Let her bear the weight of her decisions alone, especially after her precious lover vanished. Months went by. Work got better. I poured myself into projects, earned the respect of my boss with a new automotive design. My coworkers never mentioned the dark circles under my eyes. They'd probably sensed something private was going on. I kept it private, like a locked safe inside my chest. One evening after a long shift, I found Alice waiting outside my apartment building. She looked thinner, paler. Her hair was unkempt, eyes desperate. I was surprised the doorman had let her in, but he probably didn't realize she wasn't welcome. She ambushed me by the elevators, tears already glistening. "Daniel," she whispered, "I've been calling. Please, I need to talk." I fixed my gaze on the elevator numbers. "No." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "He's gone. Ryan just vanished. The baby. I can't do it alone. My job. The nights. I cut her off. "Why come to me?" She swallowed, tears forming. "Because you're the only one who ever stayed. You always told me I could count on you." Those words twisted in my gut. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside. She followed, blocking the doors with her arm. "Daniel, please, just hear me out. We can figure something out, for old time's sake." Her voice wavered on that last phrase. My chest tightened. "For old time's sake," I echoed bitterly. "That time is dead." I pressed the button. The doors tried to close again, But she didn't budge. She insisted, voice trembling. I made a mistake. 1,000 mistakes. But I'm ready to make it right. I'm sorry, Daniel. I am so sorry. I stared at the floor. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned inside me. Anger, pity, heartbreak. But the numbness was stronger. I stepped forward, forcing the doors to close. We're done. My voice was barely above a whisper. She let out a stifled cry as the elevator shut. I ascended, leaving her behind. In the weeks that followed, I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was spiraling. Anxiety, depression, heartbreak. Some said she was on the verge of losing her job. She'd cry in the break room, call in sick. They said she talked about me a lot, as though searching for a lifeline. I never reached out. I told myself, this is her consequence. She traded me for a man who gave her a rush of adrenaline, then left her stranded. That's the price. And the child. I tried not to dwell on the baby. In my darkest moments, I imagined him looking up at her with eyes that reminded her of Ryan, and the guilt would gnaw at her daily. It was a cruel thought, but heartbreak can turn decent men into something colder, far less kind. Eventually, I heard she'd been admitted to the hospital for stress complications. In a daze, I found myself driving there one evening. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, a smell that transported me back to losing my own mother to cancer a decade ago. My heart pounded as I approached her room. I expected to see her with tubes and monitors, but she was simply lying in bed, arms crossed over her chest, eyes closed. No child in sight. The baby must have been with a sitter or possibly in the nursery. My footsteps were quiet. She must have heard them anyway, because she stirred, blinking groggily. Daniel, she whispered, voice scratchy. I froze, almost turned to leave. But something kept me there. She looked frail, haunted. That strong, vibrant woman I once married was gone, replaced by a shadow. She tried to sit up. What are you doing here? I had no good answer. I stood by the doorway. The overhead light buzzed. Finally, I forced out a simple statement. I heard. She exhaled shakily, tears threatening again. Why? She didn't finish the question, but I knew what she was asking. Why come now? Why care at all? I didn't have an answer, so I stepped closer, glanced at her chart. You'll be fine, I said, voice neutral. She let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. I haven't been fine for a long time, she admitted. I stared at the floor, searching for something to say. In the end, I managed to quiet. That's not my problem anymore. Then I turned and walked out, ignoring the wave of regret that flooded my veins. Weeks turned into months, and I learned to exist in my new life. She recovered, apparently went back to work, raised the baby on her own. Maybe her mother came into town. Her father was never really in the picture. I kept my distance. Occasionally, I'd see a glimpse of her if I drove by the old house. The yard was overgrown. The paint needed touch-ups. She seemed lost, rummaging for the mail, glancing over her shoulder like she expected me to appear. But I was done. The man she once knew was dead. The bitterness, though, it lingered. Anger curdled in my gut, twisting my nights into nightmares. I'd dream about that damn garage, about her moans, about his smug grin. Each morning, I'd wake up soaked in sweat, fists clenched. My father called me more often, worried. I refused to let him in on the truth. He guessed something about a separation, but I never confirmed. He just said, "Son, if you need me, I'm here." I wished that were enough to patch the hole in my chest. I found a spark of potential revenge by searching for Ryan. I'd heard rumors. He'd lost his job, or he'd picked up some side gig in a different state. I even visited the Collins Customs garage once, saw the sign boarded up. It was a ghost town. For a moment, I fantasized about leaving a threatening message, or waiting there for him if he showed. But that impulse died quickly. I realized the real target of my anger wasn't some random drifter. I was angry at her for betraying me, for making me betray myself by staying so long, letting it happen, letting her words soothe me while she was sneaking around behind my back. The only vengeance that mattered was to erase myself from her life. Let her see what it's like to be truly alone. Then came a phone call one late afternoon. I was at the office, finishing up some designs, when my cell vibrated. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Daniel," came her voice, shaky. "Please, don't hang up." I bristled. "What do you want?" She swallowed hard. I could hear the echo of a nearly empty room behind her. I'm not asking you to come back. I know I've lost that right. But I need your help. For him." She paused, presumably meaning the baby. He's sick, and I can't reach Ryan." My mouth went dry. A swirl of anger and concern welled up inside. "That's not my responsibility." She let out a muffled sob. I know, okay. But I'm desperate. The medical bills are piling up. Daniel, I have nowhere else to turn." I stared at the blueprint on my desk, heart pounding. "Then figure it out," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I'm not his father." Silence. Then a choked whisper. "I'm sorry." She hung up. I stayed at work late that night, fighting the guilt that gnawed at me. The next morning, I couldn't focus. My coworkers noticed my distraction. The old me, the dependable, stoic man, would have felt an obligation to step in, help financially, or at least morally. But the new me was locked down by the bitterness, the betrayal. I kept telling myself, this is justice. This is what she deserves. And yet, a tiny voice inside me kept echoing. It's not the baby's fault. Eventually, I gave in enough to call the hospital, verify the child's condition. The nurse on duty gave me some details, though I wasn't the legal guardian. He was stable, some complications, but overall not life-threatening. I felt a measure of relief that surprised me, even as I hated myself for caring. I ended the call quickly. Time marched on, like a slow drumbeat. I immersed myself in a new automotive project, sometimes working weekends, anything to keep my mind occupied. My father visited once more, and I took him out to dinner. He asked me about the baby situation. I guess he'd heard something from mutual friends, or maybe rummaged it out of me in an unguarded moment. I just shook my head. Not my problem. He frowned, but didn't push. The meal went by in awkward conversation about sports and politics. One evening, months after that phone call, I found myself rummaging through old files in my closet, looking for a warranty for a vacuum. Of all things, I stumbled on our wedding photos instead. My breath caught in my throat. The album was dusty, corners frayed. I should have thrown it away. But I kept it, maybe out of some twisted nostalgia. I opened it, saw the pictures of us, younger, happier, naive. My hands shook. My shoulders trembled. I slammed the album shut, threw it in a box, and shoved it back into the closet. The wave of pain that followed was deep enough to choke me. Anger flared again, but the tears I expected never came. I'd learned how to shut those off, replaced them with an Arctic numbness. Then came her final message. I'll never forget the shaky voicemail. She was clearly upset, voice raw. "Daniel, I'm leaving Chicago," she said in that breathless hush. "I got a job in Denver. My brother set it up. I can't stay here anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted you to know. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I'll always care about you. Even if you think that's a lie, it's not." A pause, a stifled sob. Then she hung up. I listened to that voicemail 3 times, each time feeling less and less. In the end, I erased it. She was gone. The next day, I drove by the old house, saw a for sale sign hammered into the lawn. The front window was dark, and a wave of emptiness washed over me. I recalled how, not so long ago, I believed that place to be my future, a stable home for us, for the child we might have had together. Now it was a hollow shell, waiting for a new family to fill it. Exposition, development, climax, revenge. It felt like I'd lived all those phases, one after the other, culminating in this final hush. The day she drove away from Chicago, I was at a diner sipping coffee, alone in a corner booth. I watched the swirl of steam rising from the cup, felt the hush of everything around me. She was gone for good. Ryan was nowhere in sight. The child existed, but not in my life. My last tie to that old reality had severed. I felt a strange sense of calm, like the world had pressed a reset button. Or maybe I was just too numb to feel the ache anymore. A few nights later, I had a dream. In it, I stood on a small boat in the middle of a vast ocean. The water was dark, the sky overcast. I was alone, no land in sight. Then a storm hit, monstrous waves pounding the hull. I clung to the sides, sure I'd drown. But I never sank. The storm raged, yet the boat stayed afloat. I woke up, breathing hard, a single bead of sweat rolling down my temple. A bizarre sense of peace enveloped me. I survived. And that's where I find myself now, gripping that DNA test result in my living room, after rummaging through a box of old papers. It's just a piece of my past, a relic of the final blow. I drop it again, let it flutter to the floor. My chest feels tight, but I'm not going to let it crush me anymore. I walk to the window, gaze out at the city lights. Sometimes I imagine her out there, scanning the faces of strangers, searching for me in every pair of eyes. But I'm not there. I left that life behind. Maybe she regrets everything, maybe not. Ryan is just a ghost, a man who came in like a thunderclap and left chaos in his wake. The child is innocent in all this, but I can't do anything about that. My piece in this puzzle ended the day she broke our vows. I used to think silence was surrender, that it meant I was too weak to fight. But now I understand that silence can be the loudest weapon. The best way to scream. This quiet is my final statement, my unstoppable wave of condemnation. I'm not punching walls or sending threats. I'm not even looking them in the eye. I'm simply gone. That's the simplest, most definitive vengeance I can muster. Removing myself from her realm. Letting her live with the shadow I leave behind. I let out a long breath, the tension easing from my shoulders. My reflection in the glass stares back, older, haunted, but strangely resolute. The man I was a year ago is dead. The new me, this quiet, hardened virgin, is all that remains. And I can live with that, because I've learned that cold is still an emotion, powerful in its own right. When I close my eyes, I see that final scene, me turning my back on her, hearing the door click shut behind me, and letting the darkness have the last word. Maybe someday I'll find a new life, a new purpose, or even trust someone again. But not today. For now, I stand in this silence, in the calm after the storm, letting it fill my lungs like fresh winter air. My heartbreak and rage have run their course, leaving me empty but alive. The revenge is done. The final chord is struck, and there's nothing more to say.